안녕하세요. 한국 디지털 교육협회 윤보람 연구원입니다. 한국 디지털 교육협회가 준비한 첫 해외 에듀테크 박람회 연계 웨비나에 참석해 주셔서 감사합니다. 본 웨비나는 우리나라의 우수한 에듀테크 기업들의 해외 진출을 지원하기 위해서 기획되었습니다. 오늘 싱가포르와 미국의 에듀테크 시장 현황과 진출 전략, 그리고 싱가포르의 아시아 에듀테크 박람회, 미국 애리조나 주립대학과 글로벌 실리콘밸리가 주관하는 ASU+GSV 서밋 그리고 AIR Show 소개와 참가 방법을 안내해 드리려고 합니다. 웨비나를 통해 많은 정보 얻으시고 해외 진출에 도움이 되시길 바라며 몇 가지 안내사항 말씀드리겠습니다. 줌 웨비나 화면 하단에 Q&A 아이콘을 클릭하시면 질문을 남겨주실 수 있습니다. 세션 중에 언제든지 남겨주시면 되고 세션 발표가 끝난 후 Q&A 시간에 순차적으로 답변 드리도록 하겠습니다. 만약 실시간 답변을 시간 관계상 드리지 못하는 경우에는 한 번에 취합하여 추후 다시 이메일로 안내 드릴 수 있도록 하겠습니다. 또한 화면 하단 CC 아이콘을 클릭하시면 자막을 설정하실 수 있다는 점도 참고 부탁드립니다. 웨비나 종료 후에 만족도 조사에 꼭 참여해 주시기를 부탁드립니다. 세션이 끝날 때까지 많은 관심과 참여 부탁드리고 첫 번째 발표는 에듀텍 마켓 트렌드와 에듀텍 아시아 소개를 위해 스티브 휘틀리 에듀텍 컨설팅의 창립자 분께서 발표 진행해 주시겠습니다.
Okay, hopefully we've got there now. Sorry about that. We are finally up and running. So we're going to talk about the US education system, the structure, the types, the quantities. We're going to have to talk about the politics because they are increasingly affecting what and how things are taught in the US. And then we're going to talk much more about sort of the sales and the marketing side, working out who our customer is in the US, and which sort of approach we're going to take in terms of marketing, top down, bottom up. And then just towards the end, I'm going to quickly talk about a couple of companies that I've worked with in the US as case studies, so you can just get an idea of how long things take. Okay. So let's begin with the structure of schools. This is roughly the layout of schools. We'll go into a little bit more detail in a moment, but you will, when entering the US school, hear those grades mentioned constantly. You've no doubt come across K-12. That's a fairly common description. And what that really means is all students from age 4 to 18 sit within that K-12. You've probably also heard of high schools. They're often split into junior high, senior high, or occasionally combined high schools. Elementary, before that kindergarten, and before that pre-K or pre-kindergarten. A safest bet is to work on age of students. So if you're unsure, say students aged 7 to 9, and then everybody will understand what you're talking about. The actual route through schools, if we start at the bottom, we're going to start in a nursery school. That's the pre-K side of things. Then we'll go to kindergarten and then into elementary. And just towards the end of elementary, things get a little bit more complicated. Depending on where you are in the US, the state and the district, it may be that age 11, you transfer to a middle school and you would stay in that middle school until you're 14, and then you'll move into high school. However, in other places, they don't have middle schools. And so at age 12, you will probably go into a junior high or a combined junior and senior high school. Either way, you will end up in a high school until you are approaching 18. And at that point, you would potentially move off either into a general technical for a vocational qualification, a 2-year community or junior college to get a reasonable qualification, again, probably more vocational or technical, or you'll head off into basically a university path with a 4-year undergraduate program. So there's a little bit of variety depending on where you are in the part of the US, but that's roughly how it works. I've mentioned a couple of times, depends on where you are in the US. My biggest tip I would say is always remember that the United States are actually not that united in terms of their how they communicate and work with each other. So think of them as 50 separate countries that happen to share some borders. If you are successful in one state, does not mean you'll necessarily be successful in the next state, or that the next state will even have heard of you, even if you're very well established in their neighbor. They are not very good at communicating with each other, and they all want to do their own thing, and they all want to be a little bit different. So really think of them as separate markets is the safest way to get that into your head. So let's talk a little bit about the types of different schools that are out there. In total, there's around 98,000 public schools. It changes every year. It keeps growing. That was actually last year's numbers, so we're probably already over 98,000 already. And they are made up of different types of schools. So within those 98,000, there are 3,000 what are termed magnet schools. And to give you an idea of what magnet schools are about, first of all, they're admissions tested. So what that means is they don't just take any student, they take those that have got good grades coming out of the elementary school. So they are tended to be called the gifted and talented programs, or the gifted and talented students. That can lead to some resentment within the public school system because they are taking the best of the best, and the rest of the schools are left with not the best of the best students. So that can cause a little bit of sort of upset within the system. Their history is when the US decided that it was going to do much more effort to racially integrate. And back in the day, that involved busing children into different districts and into different areas so that they were getting mixed race students within the school to promote that integration and racial harmony. That probably isn't happening very much nowadays and isn't really talked about, but historically that was one of the reasons. One of the things that the magnet schools do well, and the reason they are popular, is not just because they're gifted and talented, but they tend to specialize in a particular subject area. So you may get a magnet school that specializes in maths or in English language or in the sciences or the arts. And so if you've got a student that's particularly science oriented and is getting good grades, getting them into a science magnet school means that they'll be getting a stronger science education, which may stand them in good stead going forward. So they're a bit divisive, but there are a good 3,000 of them out there. If you have a product or service that hits a specific curricular need, and there's a magnet school out there that specializes in it, they are an obvious target for you to be aiming for. Next, we have nearly 8,000 charter schools. Charter schools are different because they've got more autonomy than the public schools, and we'll come back to that in a little more detail later on. But generally speaking, schools in the US do not have a huge amount of say over what happens beyond the curriculum. So if you're selling curricular resources, you're probably okay to sell to the teachers. But if you're selling anything that is more sort of school-wide, or is potentially something that could be a little bit of an issue in terms of the political situation, then you're probably going to have to move beyond the school and move to the district level to actually get those sales. Charter schools sit a little more outside of that, and so have a little bit more control themselves. And so in some senses can be an easier sale because they've got more control themselves and don't need to get approval from higher. They're definitely more prominent in some states than others. They're not everywhere across the US. So if you are looking at charter schools, do a bit of research and you'll discover places like California, Arizona, Michigan have got quite a lot of charter schools, whereas some of the other states have got very few, if none. And also don't forget this, there are 34,000 private schools in addition to the 98,000 public schools. They tend to be forgotten in the US, but they're a very significant number. They're much harder to approach because they're sort of hidden away a little. Having said that, there are a number of shows and events around the US that are targeted at private schools and homeschoolers, where the students are taught by their parents and don't go to a school at all. That's a very significant market in the US, and again, something that you may want to consider looking at. So let's talk a little bit about that control and the funding. So the money starts at federal government at the top level, Washington, basically. It then gets devolved down to state government level. So that would be within Florida, within California, etc. They then separate their education system into districts. And these districts are quite important because that's really where all of the power lies as far as the schools go. Those districts can be anything from 1 or 2 schools to 1 or 200 schools. Again, they do vary enormously. So you really do want to do your research about those districts. We'll talk in a little bit more detail about the structure of those districts in a little while. The money then flows from the districts to the high schools and the elementary schools across however many districts they have. And so it can vary quite enormously. So it's a very top-down approach in terms of how the funding goes, and the control follows in the same way. So the leaders in those districts have a very, very strong control over what happens in those schools, much more than here in the UK, where the power is devolved into the individual schools. In the US, it all sits at that district level. So we have to talk about politics. There are a number of things happening in the US. I'm sure you're seeing it all over your news channels, just like we are, heading into an election. But basically, since we had Trump as a president, things have got really complicated in the US. And it's fair to say that the US education system is very politicized. What we're seeing is it's a battleground for the far left and the far right of the political spectrum, who believe that they know best how education should be taught, and they will work very hard to gain control within those education establishments and to limit or to steer what is being taught. And what I'm going to do now is give you a few examples of that. Superintendents are the people at the district level. They are, if you like, the gods, the most important people that we potentially want to target. They are often political appointees. In some states, they even have to stand for an election as if they were a local politician every 3 years. And they spend a huge amount of their time wrestling with the militant school boards, which are groups of concerned parents, etc. It is a very difficult job, and a lot of superintendents are under great stress and pressure, and many are leaving the profession. So it really is at the moment a job that I would not take for £1 million. One of the things that superintendents are constantly deluged by are these freedom of information requests, which are legal requirements that they need to reply to. Some of them are searching for information that can then be used against the superintendent or against the schools and can lead to legal situations. But more often than not, political sort of opponents just bombard the superintendent's office with these freedom of information requests. So they spend their entire life having to research and respond to these things and can't actually get on with their job. And then guess what? Are accused of not doing their job. So it's something that when you're talking to a superintendent, if you're talking about storing any kind of data or information about the students, about the schools, etc., or you're communicating about a purchase and all those sort of things, they will be very wary and will very quickly say to you, what does that mean if somebody sent me a freedom of information request, a FOIA? So bear that in mind. So let's talk about those key controversial topics, most of which I'm sure you'll have heard of already. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. So this is really quite a surprising one for most people, because at the end of the day, diversity, equity, inclusion are fairly obvious things that we all believe are good. However, a number of states, and it has to be said, Republican states, have been legislating against all sorts of issues regarding DEI. And we're starting to see that affect education in so much as DEI is not allowed to be mentioned, it's not allowed to be taught, and teachers who fall foul of that are finding themselves losing their jobs. Key areas for that: Florida, North and South Dakota, Tennessee, Texas, and Utah. But believe me, it's growing in certain states. Critical race theory is basically, it's almost unique to the US, I believe, but really it's about teaching the history of the US and making basically white people understand the horrors of slavery and to accept their history. Unfortunately, there are people out there who are saying what that means is it makes the white children feel guilty and stunts their growth and their development, and therefore we shouldn't teach it anymore. So it literally is failing to learn from our history. Again, all sorts of rules coming up around that. The last one here, sorry, there's one more after this: social emotional learning. That's all about creating well-being and rounded people. The problem is that many people have decided that CRT, the one above, is buried within social emotional learning, and therefore they're trying to ban social emotional learning alongside CRT. And the last one you've no doubt heard of is book banning. They've gone on a witch hunt, banning books that they believe are inappropriate. Often that's things like LGBTQ issues, agendas around transgender, those sort of things. But it's even gone as far as one state banning Harry Potter books because it promotes witchcraft and magic. So it again, crazy. So just to give you a few maps around there, this is where DEI is growing in terms of its banning. You can see we've already got quite a few bills signed into law. Although there's quite a lot saying no bill, that doesn't mean that there's not something running through their Senate at the moment. So it is something that's expanding quite dramatically. Critical race theory, again, you know, all those light blue ones, they've actually got a rule in there already. The red ones, thankfully, are vetoed ones, so that's beginning to fight back a little bit. But it is something that we've got to be very, very cautious of. It's an ongoing minefield for teachers, and I'm going to get to why that becomes an issue for us trying to sell to them in a moment. The social emotional learning, just a really good article you might want to read. There's a link at the bottom here. You're going to get these slides afterwards. Go and have a read of it. It explains why CRT is being bunched in with SEL and why that's an issue. And the last one is the book burning. Again, there's a nice report you might want to read there, but you can see that certainly central and eastern US, there's quite a bit of book burning going off. However, California and some of the West Coast have been a little bit more liberal in their approach. So why is all this important? If you are trying to put something into a school in the US, you first of all need somebody to say this is appropriate and we're happy to work with this in the US. Unfortunately, because of the position we're in at the moment, increasingly classroom teachers are not prepared to take that risk. If you have anything that is even vaguely considered within some of these categories, they will not go near it. They will not risk it. It could be their job that's at stake. And so they will pass the responsibility up the line. As I've already said, principals in schools do not have a great deal of power. They will probably pass it up to the superintendent. And so the likelihood is that even if you're selling something relatively innocuous, you may well have to seek approval from higher before you'll find that teachers themselves are actually buying stuff. So let's talk a little bit about who is that customer then. So it is potentially the teacher, the principal in the school, or it could be starting higher at the district level. So I tend to see things as basically there's a sort of a top-down approach. So if we look at the structure quickly, at state level, we've got governors and boards of education. I wouldn't bother trying to contact them. You're just not going to get anywhere in sort of trying to communicate with them. At a district level, you've got the school board, the superintendent, and the people who work around him, generally known as the cabinet. Superintendent is the right person to target at that level. And then in the school itself, you've got the principals, the vice principals, the heads of departments, and the teachers, which is probably a structure you're familiar with. If you're going to go bottom up, you're going to start probably at that school level. And part of what you're doing there might be trying to sell directly because you've got a product that's not going to be a problem. Or it could be that you're going to try and talk to those people and show them what you are capable of offering them to actually get them interested. And the reason you might do that is if you, by the side of that, do a top-down approach where you perhaps go for the superintendent might say, this looks interesting, I'll talk to my teachers. If your teachers can say, oh yeah, we've seen that already, it looks really good, then you've got that sort of perfect meeting in the middle where hopefully the teachers and or the superintendent may choose to go with your product. By the way, if you get a sale with a superintendent, that tends to mean that it's a relatively large sale and then it's going to be going into a number of schools. So although it takes longer and it's harder to achieve, the end result can be a fairly significant sale. So how do you get in there? So if we're going bottom up, we're targeting the teachers, the principals, the people in the school. It's all the obvious routes in X, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky. Social media is a very good way to get to those teachers and is probably only a cost-effective way of doing it nowadays. Keep an eye on Threads. That's the Meta, Mr. Zuckerberg's version of Twitter. It's growing quite rapidly, and there's a lot of educators moving in there because it's less toxic than Twitter. There's a group in there called Threaducators, and I definitely think that it's something you should look at. Email campaigns, there are a million companies out there that will help you do email campaigns and have got varying lists. Pick your list carefully, make sure you see some good samples from that list. If it's got things like school at, hello at, info at, they're not going to go anywhere. You need actual email addresses of actual teachers and actual principals. So make sure you get a good list. Obviously, doing demonstrations online is a great way to get people in to actually see things, webinars, those sort of things. And as always, free resources. If you're doing an email campaign or you're doing a webinar, have something free, a free demo, a free trial, a free download of a resource, something like that. Exhibitions. I mean, Tom is going to talk about the AIR Show, the ASU+GSV. It's a lovely title. Interesting new show that is something that you may want to consider. Much more established is ISTE, which is a very large EdTech show. It's probably the second largest, the largest one being the BET show in the UK. They're of a similar sort of target audience, lots and lots of teachers over a few days. FETC used to be called the Florida Education Technology. It's now called the Future Education Technology, usually in January. Smaller, but a good crowd of senior sort of EdTech and IT people at that one. And many state level conferences. If you start looking, you'll find at least 20 or 30 every week of the year except Christmas throughout the US. Many subject specific, which is where I would say you potentially need to go. Just quickly talking about payment options, think about subscription models. They're acceptable, but US banking is pretty traditional. They might want checks, and that probably means you need an American bank account. So think about that. If you only accept online payment, you'll probably be fine, and they'll probably pay with a credit card. But on those larger deals, they'll want to cut a check, and that's where you probably will need a US bank account to actually get hold of that check. Quickly, top down. There are very difficult people to get at, superintendents, as you can imagine. We've seen all the pressures they're under and the power that they wield. Two that I would recommend. One is the ERDI, which I've done a lot of work with. They pull together 100 superintendents twice a year, and you get to pay for the privilege to sit down with them in a panel session for a couple of hours and really drill them about your product and how appropriate it is. It's not a sales opportunity, but it often turns into sales because you build some relationships with superintendents. The other one is the IEI, very similar, but is much more salesy oriented, so you do actually pitch to the superintendents. Those two are great ways to get a superintendents, but they're not cheap. Exhibitions and conferences that you might consider specifically aimed at the superintendent level. Well, there's 3 for you to have a look at that would give you a good starting point if you want to just go and meet some superintendents and get a feel for what it's about. Think about whether you're going to direct or through a reseller. Obviously, a reseller brings you potential advantages of understanding the market, being on the ground, able to do local support, etc., etc. But they cost you money, so you've got to give them margin. Bear that in mind as well. Quickly, a couple of case studies. The first one is an organization called Massalit, who basically have 9,000 videos aimed at high school students that are all delivered by top-line professors, literally people with Nobel Prizes, that sort of thing. It's a great way for the students to interact at that sort of higher level. It's a great way for the teachers to increase their knowledge in a specific area. They literally went into the market this year for the first time in February. We began with 2 panel sessions at that ERDI that I mentioned. And what we discovered is, first of all, there's a clear interest in the product. We know that we've got something that American schools are interested in. There were definitely modifications required. We need to increase the level of US content, US professors, and US subject areas. We need to redo the language into US versions. They were okay with the English accent, but where something was written, we need to move into the US spelling. We need to align the content to the standards, both national and state, which is a fairly obvious thing we knew on the way in, but we had that confirmed. But what we weren't expecting is all the superintendents said, man, if you had this number of videos or even a fraction of this number of videos for our elementary school teachers, this would be amazing because they're not subject specialists and this would give them some real background and some real knowledge. That was quite a surprise. We weren't expecting it. So 3 superintendents volunteered to assist with the curriculum development and aligning to the standards. So we've got a lovely connection with 3 of them already. 2 of them are willing to run pilots in the districts, so we get to actually get into some schools fairly quickly. And I strongly suspect if they go well, they will turn into customers. We've already agreed that we need to produce 1,000 videos for elementary. There was such a strong demand for it. So it's a whole new offshoot from where the company is today to particularly target that market. Next steps, they're going back to ERDI in July. They enjoyed their first visit so much, they're going back again to see some more and get some more interest. We're going to start some trials in September, and we guess we'll get into some sales and market towards the end of the year. And the thing to take from this is nothing happens quickly in the US. It's going to take you a year or 2 to really get somewhere. Don't expect quick returns. So that's their website if you do want to go and have a look. Last page, just quickly going to look at Wellbe. It's a staff well-being resource. Again, went into the market in 2021 with ERDI and through a few shows and things. What we discovered is significant need. There's an awful lot of well-being, which they tend to call culture and climate in the US. Lots of problems, lots of teachers leaving. So they know they need to do a lot of work on it. The Wellbe package is seen in the US to offer some fairly unique USPs. The main one being it actually offers recommendations. It doesn't just tell you you've got a problem. After a survey, it says this is what you might want to do to fix it. And the Americans are really going, wow, we don't get this in many products. First thing we needed to do was move everything to the US because we're storing lots of sensitive data of all those teachers. And although legally we could have brought it to the UK, it was a minefield of getting approvals. We spun up an Amazon server in New York, put a version of our software in New York, and everything sits in New York, and everybody in America is happy. So I would suspect you might need to consider doing the same. Again, we've got a lot of work to change the language on this one because there's a lot of written materials and we really had to go through not just changing spellings, but actually changing entire contexts because there are things that are different in the US. We had to change the marketing message very significantly. How we sell it in the UK and how we sell it in the US has evolved into something really quite different because we listened to what we were being told by the US market, and we've changed our message to match their key pain points. The route to markets on this product is not at all via schools. There's no way a school, even the principal in the school, would have authorization to buy this product and run a survey on the staff. It had to be at district level. So the results, It's got a small US team now out there running. It's run 3 pilots in small to medium-sized districts. One of those pilots was a paid-for pilot. Up to date, it's now in 5 districts, making significant sales. One of them's just resubscribed, so we know that they're happy and they're in for the 2nd year. And the next steps is, well, they're actually in an investment round at the moment, looking for around £3 million, dollars. And the hope is that one of the companies coming in on the investment round will be a US company, because there is such potential out there. We've now got US investors interested. Incorporating into the US as a fully fledged US company. And obviously to grow that sales and marketing team as and when we get that investment in there and really roll it out at full speed. So there we go. That's hopefully giving you a rough idea of how things can happen in the US. Couple of years, but can pay dividends. That's me in terms of presentation. I think we're going to have Tom do his presentation and then do questions. Is that correct?
Yes.
I think that's right, Steve.
Great.
Thank you,
I
Sid.
will stop sharing my screen and let Tom talk to you.
Great. So, is that working?
Yes.
Good. Thank you, Steve. I will get straight onto it with this. So good morning from the UK, everyone. Annyeonghaseyo. My name is Tom Poole. I'm Chief Partnerships Officer at GSV, which is Global Silicon Valley. So we're one of the world's leading funds that invest into education technology. Before I go into the details on the AIR Show, which is what I'm going to focus on today, I wanted to quickly show you where it came from with our summit, which also takes place at the same time, just for the context and backstory, really. So the ASU+GSV Summit was launched, I think, 16 years ago now, and it's a partnership between GSV, Global Silicon Valley, the VC fund, and with ASU, Arizona State University. So this is a partnership that brings together the investment piece, but also from the innovation university piece. ASU is the leading university in the USA for innovation. So in terms of looking at the future of any sort of technology, but in this case, specifically technology, are a great partner. Obviously a huge university as well, very focused on equality and sort of serving everybody who wants education. So the partnership works with us and them, and that is, I'll go on to speak a little bit more about the AIR Show as well, but that is all in partnership between GSV and ASU. The ASU+GSV Summit is really very high level. It's an exclusive event that brings together all of the senior people when it comes to talking about the future of EdTech. So everyone will be there, from the likes of the university leaders, the superintendents from school districts, but also lots of the leading innovative startups from around the world. You've got nonprofits, corporate enterprises, consultants. Of course, there's a lot of investment at this event with all of the future-facing innovative education technology products. A huge amount of companies that are coming in to invest in them, to merge, to acquire them, are all present as well. And of course, like, I think sticking, let me just see if I can, next slide. It's not working. Bear with me, I just need to find the next slide if I can. Where have we got to? There we go. Coming to our North Star, which is that all people deserve equal access to the future. Innovations in scale delivery of learning and skills critical to achieving this mission. So with the summit, it's bringing together all of those forward-thinking people and really at a macro level, what's happening in education technology. Our event, this summit, takes place in San Diego annually, and it is very much a kind of a global event, probably 75% US, 25% international in total, but very much focused about the future of education technology around the world. Okay, very quickly touching on the numbers. This is for the summit. So this is the leadership conference. So you'll see some big numbers there. I think the one that strikes me is the $5 trillion amount of capital managed by investors at the summit, which is obviously huge. We have 7,000 attendees in total. It's a really nice mix of that kind of the education side of things, the investment side, and a lot about kind of workforce skills, corporate enterprise as well. We have a huge network and expecting 15,000 people altogether in San Diego in April, when you include the attendees we'll see at the AIR Show as well. Just sort of highlighting speakers that we've had, that's former US President George Bush Jr. And Forbes describing ASU+GSV Summit as the Davos of education, a must-attend event for education technology investors from the New York Times. I'm very happy to, if anyone's got any questions specifically on the summit, I can answer them. Very happy to share information on that as well. But for today, just want to focus on where we are with the AIR Show. So this is the inaugural AIR Show. It's the first time we've run an event like this. And where does it come from? So the idea is that there's an AI revolution in education right now. Obviously, from our position as a venture capitalist fund, we're seeing that all of the EdTech companies being invested in are very much revolving around AI. So we see that as being the future of EdTech. So we can take lots of the learnings from that summit that takes place and has taken place for 16 years and put that into practice in an expo. So the idea is that we'll have an event here, the AIR Show, which is free to attend. So educators can attend, can come and meet with companies, can kind of get much more hands-on with the AI tools that will be in their classroom, if not this year, next year, or the year after. And it really is a focus on AI's role in education. I think, you know, around the world, there's obviously lots of hype about how great AI can be in education, and lots of the future tools will have it. But I think refining that down and presenting to a group of teachers is very, very different. So what we want to do is bring educators together and talk to them about the challenges they're facing, what are the fears that they have, and get them on board for what it's going to be, the AI revolution in education. So thinking we want it to be more than an expo. It's not just going to be an exhibition hall. It's really about teachers being at the center, lots of workshops, lots of fun stuff going on. Like we've got some live music acts, and really just making it like a feeling of empowerment for the educators who are working with AI. A little bit more about the numbers here. So we'll run on the 13th to 15th of April. So that is separate to the summit, which is the 14th until the 17th. So the reason we've done that is because we have a slight crossover of days. It means we have the 13th and 14th of April, where that will be a weekend. So we're really focusing on bringing in that education community to participate with us then. But then, of course, the 14th until the 17th is the ASU+GSV Summit, where we have all of those superintendents, university presidents, investors around San Diego at that time. So it gives us a really sweet spot. So we're really going to bring together a mix of everyone, from the educators all the way through to the superintendents that Steve was talking a lot about just then as well. And the idea is that, you know, you come along to this event, you've got a chance to not only present yourselves to the education community, but also there's a huge amount of investment community who'll be present as well. So there's two sides to the participation. I think also want to really closely look at how we can support international companies when they're coming over to the US. I think that's a big part of what we want to do with the AIR Show. So the ways in which we're doing that is by really the groups that Steve was talking about just now, the superintendents. So with the summit, we see around 1,000 different school district leaders, superintendents present there. So as part of the AIR Show, they're a huge focus of who we want to get across. And I think about when we looked at registration yesterday, we had about 10% of our attendees were coming from K-12, were coming from the like the school district or assistant school district leader level. So there are really those senior decision makers there, as well as the educators at the same time. And obviously a huge part of getting a foothold in the US market is also if you're working with investors there as well. So there's a huge opportunity to work with investors who can support you in investment in products. And also some of those big corporates where you might be able to partner with them. So the likes of Microsoft, of Google, of even ASU, who are working with some companies, AWS, all of these companies are there in a big way. And all of them obviously have huge foothold in the US market. So seeing how we can connect up as many of those dots to support the companies coming across is also really, really important. Wanted to touch a little bit on numbers as well. Of course, we're looking to try and bring across 10,000 in total specifically for the AIR Show. But coming back down to the point of the US being split into 50 different countries, California, where this runs in San Diego, has a population of 40 million people alone, which is obviously huge. So even if you just treated this event as targeting the California market, that is something that can work. Although the great thing for us is actually only 20% of our superintendents attending are from California. So you will get to touch base with people from across the US as well. But California is a huge market in itself. And I think another thing I wanted to mention is that I think LA has the largest population of Koreans outside of Korea. So 500,000 Korean people living in California as well, which is huge. And obviously for lots of you with products that maybe would be more targeted, or we want to partner with Korean people in the US, there's an opportunity there, and California is a great place to do that as well. The show is, yeah, there we go. But we're focusing on, I'd say mainly focused on early childhood and K-12 and a bit of higher education. They're the key focuses for this year. We haven't, in terms of the expo, there's not as much of a focus on workforce technology and people and learning leaders. There is some of it, and there is a huge focus on that within the summit. So we would expect those groups to come over as well. But if your product is from the K-12 higher education space, that is where we are seeing the largest amount of registration right now. Also, if you're looking to partner with any other AI innovators, there are a number of startup companies involved, and a huge number of nonprofits who are really key to supporting the growth in EdTech in the States as well, specifically. Realize I've probably got only a minute or two left now, but just a very quick show at a glance. We run on the 3 days, so it will start at midday on Saturday, running all the way through Sunday and Monday. And yeah, so we've got lots happening at the same time. You've got the main stage for the AIR Show, demo stage as well. We're really recommending that any companies coming to participate demo their products and present what they can do. And then very quickly, I know with our event, we're running in 1 month's time. So very quickly, if you're worried about, oh, I haven't got time to plan to participate, we've come up with some very easy to work with turnkey packages that are very much plug and play. So we've got the gold exhibitor booth there, which is very customizable. You add your branding on, you get Wi-Fi access, you get lead scanning as well. So you have an app on your phone where you can scan all the people coming to your stand, and you'd get a 10-minute demo stage opportunity included. Basically, we've taken all the pressure of organizing an event away from you as the company participating. So anything there, we can help support on, and that's the gold booth is there, $25,000. Or the silver booth there, smaller price point, but a great way of getting involved and getting on the show floor. Again, completely customizable, comes with a screen, comes with Wi-Fi and access for 2 devices, and most importantly, comes with lead scanning as well. So opportunities to get involved. We have limited number of space remaining, but these booths are available until the 31st of March, I think we've got until. So if you're interested in joining us this year, would love to have you with us. And yeah, my details are at the end of this. And yeah, any questions that anyone's got, feel free to ask me now. I know we're going to a quick Q&A, but of course, here's my email. If you want to email me anything more about the ASU+GSV Summit or the AIR Show as well, very happy to come back on any questions. That's it from me. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you. We are going to move on to Q&A session. So if you click the Q&A icon in the bottom of the screen, you can see some questions. So we have, I think, 3 questions for Steve and 2 questions for Tom. Tom, would you like to go ahead and answer those questions?
Yeah.
Hello.
Sure.
Sorry, I still can't get my video to work. So you've got a voice and no picture. Sorry. It still is saying that my video has been blocked by the host. Sorry. Okay, first question. Ellie, hopefully I answered most of those questions in the presentation I did. it is all the traditional routes to market that you would expect. Social media, mail shotting, exhibitions. That's the main thrust of everything, I would say, in terms of engaging with teachers and educators. If you've got any more specific questions, feel free to fire them over to me. I'm happy to answer them afterwards. The next question is asking a little bit about Hawaii. So I've just had a very quick Google, and it says that Hawaii is slightly strange in so much as it only has one district for all of the schools, but then the district is broken down into 15 regional complex areas, which to me sounds like a district by a different name. In total, there are 295 schools in Hawaii. 258 are public and 37 are charter schools. So I hope that helps. Just basically Google Hawaii schools and you'll get to that data. One of the things that's really nice about the US is every state produces at least a single website on the entire district, and then most, if not all, schools have a separate website as well about their particular school. So if you do a little bit of searching, it usually ends in .gov. You can usually find an awful lot of information for yourself very quickly through doing a Google search. Borum is asking, in public schools, what are the terms of superintendents and do they move on from one school to another? It varies massively. Some roles, I would say the majority of superintendents are permanent positions that don't require re-election, so they're full-time forever jobs. Those that do require re-election, I've seen some at 2, some at 3, and some at 5 years for re-election. So that varies quite significantly state by state. In terms of moving, when they're a superintendent, they're not likely to go back into school. They probably started in school as a teacher and then perhaps became a principal and then have moved up to superintendent. So it's unlikely they'd go back into a school, but they do move between districts and between states. So one of the gentlemen that I've got working for me at the moment on the Welby has been a superintendent 5 times in different states all around the country. And that does speak to the community out there. They do talk to each other. It's one of the few areas in the US where if you've got a superintendent on side, there's a good chance they'll talk to their colleague, and that might result in you getting a nice referral and some more business. School level, it doesn't happen, but at superintendent level, it does. Tom, I think over to you.
Thanks, Steve. First question from Ellie about whether ASU+GSV Summit has an official Asian EdTech Alliance or community. We don't have an official community group at the moment. I know we worked with the Asian EdTech Alliance last year. I wasn't working for GSV then, but I think the Asian EdTech Alliance took a kind of large-scale partnership with a group of edtechs coming over from Asia. I'm not sure what countries they were coming from, but I think the lead person on that group was Korean. And the thing we will always do, if we've got a group like that, if it was the Asian EdTech Alliance, if it was an association or anything like that, we'd always do as much as we can to give them as much exposure to all of the participants at the summit, whether that's through networking events, whether it's through other ways, specific sessions about country-specific products, or pairing up what a certain company has done with the Ministry of Education or something. We're always happy to amplify that as much as we can, but we need there to be an external lead on that. So whether that's Asian EdTech Alliance, or maybe it was something like KEFA or another association did in future, we'd always happily support that and their participation there. And then second question on the air show. So what motivates the decision to organize the air show independently from the summit? So actually the summit is completely at capacity. The hotel we use has like 0 space left, pretty much 0 room for any other people to attend. So we knew when we were creating the air show, it would be something that ran in a separate location. But fortunately, the San Diego Convention Center is, I'd say, a 7-minute walk from the summit. So actually it's a great thing that, anyone who's at the summit has, San Diego in April is a pretty lovely place to be. We're expecting people who are going to take that 7-minute walk from the summit over to the air show and spend lots of time there. In terms of organizing it separately, we feel like the summit is exclusive and it's a paid for ticketed event. And we don't want to sort of lose the huge amount of credibility it's built up over the years, especially when it's completely at capacity. And also we want the educators coming to the AIR Show to really be able to get hands-on with products and spend time meeting with other educators as well. I think peer-to-peer in EdTech is such a huge part that supports the education community and can also really support research and development for products as well. And I think getting people together to do that in a separate place is actually really important. But yeah, just to reiterate, the dates are very, very similar. So the idea is we're taking over San Diego that week, and you can spend a bit of time at the summit and the AIR Show if you're someone that wants to do both events.
Thank you. Let's see if we have, we do have one more question from Ellie. How many attendees do you expect to visit the AIR Show?
Yeah, so we expect there to be 10,000 attendees at the AIR Show. So at the moment, we're expecting to get about probably over 5,000 from specifically who we've targeted for the AIR Show campaign. So that is really tapping into that educator community. A huge number of those are registered from California, of course. As we get closer to the event, the majority of people registering will be those who are within a few hours of San Diego. But we're also expecting a kind of somewhere like 40% crossover of summit attendees as well, who are separate. They're the ones who have paid for their summit ticket and will be in San Diego already. So 10,000 in total over the 3 days is what we're expecting for the AIR Show. Great. Thank you, Ellie. Thanks for your questions as well.
Okay, so I think that's it for the Q&A session for today. If I receive any questions after the webinar, I'm going to share with you too, so we can answer them afterwards. Thank you for the presentation today, Steve and Tom. We are going to wrap up the webinar today. I have few announcements to make for the participants. I'll do that in Korean. 네, 오늘 참가해 주셔서 감사합니다. Q&A 아이콘 클릭하셔서 질문 남기신 거 오늘 답변하지 못한 내용은 이메일로 추후에 다시 안내 드릴 수 있도록 하겠습니다. 웨비나 종료 후에 만족도 조사 진행하고 있습니다. 하단 QR코드로 스캔하셔서 참여하실 수 있고 혹은 참가자 메일로 링크 발송드리면 꼭 참여해 주시기를 부탁드립니다. 웨비나 영상과 슬라이드는 추후에 캐파 웹사이트에서 다시 보실 수 있다는 점을 지금 다시 안내 드립니다. 오늘 참가해 주셔서 감사합니다. 이것으로 웨비나 마치도록 하겠습니다. 감사합니다.